Hello, everybody, and welcome to Command Point. It is, of course, the 10th day of Kill Team, and we are done we're taking a quick break from talking about good, super complicated teams. We're going to talk about a good, less complicated team today. We're talking about the Intercession, and I'm joined here today by the winner of the New York Open, Adrian. Adrian, how you doing?
Hey, good, Shane. Thanks for having me. I'm doing really well. Just been getting the reps in and enjoying honestly everything Kill Team for the past year or so.
Awesome. Yeah, and you seem to have taken a liking to the Intercessors.
Yeah, I've actually only been playing for the past year, but I came from Big 40K and I had Deathwatch as my main force. So I just naturally, when I stepped into Kill Team, started playing Compendium Deathwatch because I had the models and I really loved the lore behind them.
Mm-hmm.
And then, once Intercession came along, I was just kind of curious to try, and I really couldn't ignore the durability benefits that they had over Deathwatch. While Deathwatch can take a lot of cool weapon options and storm shields and Xenophase blades and multiple plasma guns, they just felt so fragile, and I didn't really feel like they felt like Marines in the lore. So made the switch to Intercession, and have been really enjoying playing them.
Yeah, if there's one thing that the Intercession are, it's durable.
Yeah.
So I guess let's get started. So let's say for somebody that is new to Kill Team and they're in the process of picking their first faction, and they're looking at Intercession, how would you describe the play style of this team in kind of basic terms?
Yeah, so I think the first thing that stands out to me is probably the fact that they're generalists. I think they're good at most things and not great at anything. I mean, they don't have the best shooting in the game, they don't have the best melee in the game, or even the most durable models for that fact. That probably goes to Gellerpox and some other people. However, every single model they have is still very good at melee, very good at shooting, and very durable. So across the board, each operative really puts in the work in a lot of different areas. So I think generalists is probably the thing that stands out first for me. They're really good for mixed terrain tournaments because of that, and also versus a variety of opponents because of that. Um, Interestingly enough, also, they don't really have a lot of specialists, but they do have a very flexible operative selection, just in terms of how you allocate that melee versus ranged threat, which not every other team has. So you can elect to go full melee, full shooting, a half and half mix, 60-40. So that's really interesting. Like we said before, just a second ago, they are really tough and can be very hard to shift for certain opponents in certain situations. And they also have a really high potential damage output versus hordes, or even versus elites, if you factor in, having the P1 on the bolters plus rerolls and some other things like that.
Yeah, very nice. I like the point that they are really good at a lot of things. They're probably like top three shooting, like top three melee, like top three durability, but they're not the number one in anything. It's just being able to be so good at so many things is
Exactly.
quite the strength. So, with that in mind, what about this playstyle specifically appealed to you as a player when you were getting into Intercession?
Yeah, well, I mean, other than the fact that I just love the lore and the models, and I had them, I really do like the fact that it is a low mental load overall. And
Mm-hmm.
what that does is allows me to learn my rules very quickly and work on really getting the most optimum pregame selections in for the matchup, for the terrain, for the opponent, and then really focus on my opponent's rules. So I think the fact that they are low cognitive load really allows you to focus a lot more of your own time on learning your opponent's rules so that you know exactly what they can do, what they might do, so you're not getting tricked, which is a big thing that can happen when you only have a six operative team. If you make mistakes, a good opponent with a larger team, 10 plus models that also has Plasma Melta can punish you really, really hard. So playing Intercession, I think, allows you to actually learn a lot more about the rest of the game, which helps your gameplay overall. They have a low model count, which is nice just from a hobby perspective, to be honest.
Yeah.
And I don't love this part of it, but the fact of their play style is there's a lot of setting yourself up for success pre-game, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what are your chapter tactics? Are you giving yourself flexibility to swap one of those out depending on your opponents and what you're going into? What operatives do you choose for the matchup? Because if you choose the wrong allocation of melee versus ranged, you can lose the game right there. What equipment are you taking? What tac ops are you playing? If you deploy first, Are you doing conservative? Are you favoring one side of the map? So once you're in the game, you have 6 operatives, and most of the plays are, for the most part, are fairly obvious. But there's a lot of pregame prep that goes into setting yourself up for the best chance. And I don't know if I love that, but that it is something that should be mentioned because I think it's a fact of playing these 6-man teams.
Yeah. So would you say that there is a, like, as a play, like playing them on the table, there's like a lower learning curve then?
I would say 100%. I think
Yeah.
they're one of the quickest teams to pick up and most forgiving for newer players, which I think is great. I think it's really good for the game that GW released these rules for free.
Yeah.
Most people have Space Marine models, or you can get them for real cheap on a third party site, or borrow your friends or borrow the stores. You're gonna have the models. They're easy to remember. They're fun to play. Everybody loves Space Marines, myself included. And it teaches you the fundamentals of the game really quickly, and then you can use that as a jumping off point to take that to any other faction.
Okay. All right, next question. So let's say you're at a tournament and you're playing and it's your turn and I am walking by and I stop at your table and I watch for about a minute. What is the coolest, biggest, flashiest play that you would do that would catch my eye that Intercession can pull off?
Fair enough. Well, you'd have to stay there for a little while. However, the first things that come to mind are probably just maximizing the amount of damage some of these models can put out. So for the Shooty Sergeant, for example, if you're on a vantage point against orcs or some other horde team, for example, to double shoot and then overwatch and then shoot on death. So you're potentially killing 4 models in one turn. And if you're trading, 3 to 4 models per Marine, that's a game you're winning. So that's one of the coolest things I've ever done, is probably just kill 4 dudes in the same turn. Also, similarly with the grenade launcher and a frag, I've had a situation where I've gotten a really cheeky on Into the Dark, a frag shot off that's caught like 4 models.
Yeah.
And then I've died and I've sent another frag grenade and caught another 3 models. So the shoot on death combined with the amount of shooting they can already do with 2 shots per turn plus Overwatch plus shoot on death is pretty incredible. It doesn't happen often, but when it does, it's for sure flashy. Or the other part of that is versus elites. If you have the Plasma Sergeant, this actually happened to me when I was learning, and it didn't feel great. This is how I know. But I had my opponent's Plasma Sergeant charged into one of my Marines, finished him off in melee, and then plasmed another Marine to death. And then instead of charging him in combat, I shot him to death, and then he overcharges Plasma Pistol again on death, killing a 3rd Marine. Okay. So a 3-to-1 trade, elites versus elites, and that was the game right there. But one Marine can take out a ton of models if you get the positioning correct.
For sure. So how about matchups? What would you say their best matchups are as far as what you're going to see in the meta right now?
Yeah, I think their best matchups, honestly, Commandos are still fairly popular, and Intercession, they're damn near a hard counter to Commandos. Like, I feel bad sometimes because I've played some good Commandos players, and I'm just like, you're doing everything right. It's just tough. It's really tough. So they pretty much hard counter Commandos. Novitiates, if you get into them in combat, they do very well. They're pretty good against Void Dancers as well, both in terms of shooting and melee, especially depending on your chapter tactics and equipment selection. If you're not careful, sometimes a Void Dancer could charge into you, and if you don't roll your rolls perfectly, then you just end up dying anyway. And then I think they're pretty good into most factions in the mid-tier and below.
Okay. How about worst matchups? What do they struggle the most against?
I think probably any team with dedicated plasma, melta, and ways to manipulate dice. And that usually comes along with teams with more operatives that out-activate you other than Legionnaires. Yeah. So teams like Breachers, like Pathfinders on Open, like AdMech, like Blooded, Vet Guard, they can afford to wait until you've already positioned all your guys. And if you don't position yourself very carefully, they're going to probably almost guaranteed kill a Marine or 2 just with their last-minute plasma shots, last-minute Melta shots if they, get an extra APL, move, dash, and Melta you. Breachers are really tough just because of the dice manipulation they have, like with all the tac ops and the strat ploys to basically breach and clear and almost guarantee 4 hits on Plasma or Melta. That feels really bad. And going into Chaos is actually pretty hard. Going into Legionnaires, just because they're a little bit less durable. If they're running Nurgle, they're probably about the same, but they have so many sources of higher AP and weapons, and their melee is also better. So that's a really tough matchup.
I can see that. I mean, you mentioned earlier on the good matchups, you mentioned the Commandos one, and I have been on the Intercession side of that matchup, and you are not wrong. It is brutal.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
so one thing I did want to ask you, let's say you're going to a tournament with like a open and into the dark format, kind of like the New York Open was. What are your go-to chapter tactics? Because I know they have a lot of different choices there.
yeah. What I took for the New York Open was durable and rapid, and I was playing around with a lot of them pre-tournament. I made a last-minute call to switch from methodical to durable. My thinking there was that I would rather have a wounded, alive Marine than less Marines that are a bit more accurate.
Mm-hmm.
So durable came in so clutch in certain situations, just to keep a Marine alive for one or even two more activations. The first one that comes to mind is, I forget the name of the model, but when I think it's their guy with the two-handed axe on Legionnaires charges in and crits for 7.
Yeah,
So
butcher.
yeah, exactly. No longer is he two-shotting you, and I had him charge into me, and I actually just killed him in return.
Yeah,
So
I mean,
durable just tips the scales in a little bit in your direction. A lot of key matchups, and then rapid was more of a tech choice. Don't get me wrong, I love the extra inch of movement, but it was mostly there for the toughest matchups like AdMech with all their Rust Stalkers to
mm-hmm.
switch into Dueler and then take max tilting shields.
Interesting. Okay, very cool. And honestly too, the thing about like you mentioned durable is the idea that you're reducing the crits, and the idea of killing an intercession model without using at least a couple crits is like kind of hard to imagine. So
Yep.
it's really easy to get the value there.
Yeah. I'd say
So
it's probably 2 to 3 extra wounds per game, depending. And sometimes, like when there's a 3/3 weapon or a 4/4 weapon, you're doing less damage on a crit. And then
yeah,
the additional thing that's great about that is when in shooting, you don't have to worry about rolling crit saves anymore because they're doing the same amount of damage.
yep, exactly, yeah. So one thing a lot of new players struggle with a little bit is that turn one, like figuring out what they want to do on turn one. What am I supposed to be doing on turn one? So how do you typically approach turn one with intercession?
Yeah, I think that probably depends on the format. So I'll probably break it down into 2 parts because Into the Dark and Open are completely different games. So Into the Dark, I start pretty conservative. I try and set maybe 1 or 2 people on engage, either to maybe get a cheeky shot off with the grenade launcher or get a charge off onto a point that I can hide in combat with, or at the very least, just maybe to dissuade an opponent from walking into a room, and I just keep that guy behind a door.
Yep.
But Into the Dark, I'm very conservative. I don't like to open a lot of doors turn one, just because with the 3 APL, I don't necessarily need to. And it just opens you up to people getting extra activations, moving and dashing to be within 2 to break that cover, and then blowing you off the board. So playing with doors turn one and or throughout the game is huge for intercession with the 3 APL. So Into the Dark, very conservative for the most part. For open, it's highly dependent on terrain, but the things I like to look for, number one, are anything that I can shoot from one way with obscurity with the Auspex is really good. If there's favorable lines, I might even take defender just to choose that side of the map.
Mm-hmm.
I look for vantage points a lot too, especially against hordes, because like I said, if you can get your sergeant up, hitting on 2s, reeling 1s onto a vantage point, and even if you just get one shot off, if you do, say, a pregame dash to get up to climbing distance, you climb up, get a shot off, kill a guardsman, kill an orc, and then drop back down, you're not even being able to be shot. So vantage points are huge for turn one, turn two shooting. But I'm a bit more aggressive overall on open, just because you can't hide as much.
Makes sense. So how about like what's for you like a good like level up tip for a new player? Like one of those things that you play the team like 4 or 5 times and something new clicks for you, like, oh, I should have been doing this the whole time. Like what's that secret kind of special spicy tip you've got for intercession?
Yeah. I don't think there are any true secrets with intercession, just because all their cards are pretty much on the table. You and your opponent pretty much know all their rules. However, a tip that I touched on briefly before that really was a big turning point for me was maybe not choosing the 2 generically strongest chapter tactics, like durable and methodical, for example, but giving yourself flexibility to switch in and out in a tree that will help you given the tournament, given the terrain, and given the matchups you're likely to run into. So I think overall, if you were to just say, what are the 2 best chapter tactics? I would probably pick durable and methodical.
Yeah.
However, what are the 2 best chapter tactics for a tournament where AdMech's going to be there, where, Chaos is going to be there with good melee. I think it's probably Rapid, because then you swap out, and that just gives you so much extra, oomph, so to speak, in melee with the double parry and the tilting shields.
All right, that makes a lot of sense. So, final question before we wrap up: do you have a favorite Christmas song, and if so, what is it?
I don't know if I actually do, but lately I've been really into like the kind of jazzy Christmas stuff.
Okay.
So just some kind of instrumental Christmas classics with heavy on the jazz flair. That's what I've been listening to for the past couple of years, and I've just been really digging it.
Awesome. I love that. I'm getting so many different answers, and it's really my favorite part. So,
although I will say, there was, when I was a kid, there was a Looney Tunes Christmas CD that I used to listen to on repeat and spit my milk out with some of the lyrics that were there. But I was into that when I was a kid. But now it's sophisticated jazz.
There we go. The adults' Christmas music.
I
love it. So, of course, this kind of wraps up our interview here today. Thank you so much, Adrian, for coming on and talking to me about Intercession. We're definitely going to get a longer interview about your New York Open run sometime in the future. So, guys, stay tuned for that.
Sounds good. Thank you, Shane.
Yeah, of course. Final words. Thank you, everybody that is watching. If you stumbled upon this and you're not subscribed, give us a subscribe. That would be super awesome. We're getting really close to 7,000 subscribers. I say it every episode, and it's not changing. And if you're on our Patreon or you're a YouTube member, special shout out to you guys. You're the best. And this is the 10th day of Kill Team, talking about Intercession. Signing out.